Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this important conversation on youth mental health. My name is Tiffany Raether, and I'm part of the team here at MindSite News. In this conversation, we may be covering some sensitive topics. If you or someone you know is in crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts, call or text 988 to reach the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Services are free and available 24 hours, 7 days a week. We will be putting this information in the chat throughout the event. After we conduct our interview, there will be an opportunity for panelists to answer questions which may arise for you throughout the event. Feel free to input your questions in the chat and we'll address as many as we can in the audience Q&A portion of today's conversation. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to our moderators, Rob Waters and Dr. Neha Chaudhry. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany, and hello, everyone. My name is Rob Waters, and I'm the founding editor of MindSite News. We're a nonprofit digital news site focused on mental health reporting. We started last year and are just about 3 weeks short of celebrating our first birthday.
And I'm Dr. Neha Chaudhry. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Mass General and Harvard, and I'm Chief Medical Officer of BeMe, which is a digital mental health platform for teens. And I'm also pleased to be a member of the MindSite News Editorial Advisory Board.
We appreciate all of you taking the time to join us today. If you're watching today on Zoom and know some folks who might be interested, send them a text right now and suggest that they go to the Facebook page for MindSite News, where we are also live streaming the conversation. We're really fortunate to have special guests from the Hiding in Plain Sight documentary, which is streaming now on Amazon Prime and will stream free on demand on the PBS app for the rest of this month. And that's an acknowledgement of Suicide Prevention Month. Neha, I know this is especially important to you, this event, and very relevant to your work as a child and adolescent psychiatrist.
Absolutely, Rob. I've really been looking forward to this conversation because youth mental health is something I care a lot about. It's something that I wish I knew more about when I was young and that people talked about. And, all of the patients that I see are kids and teens who are struggling with the same themes as the people featured in this documentary. It was spot on in capturing these real life cases. And I've been hearing loud and clear from youth that mental health struggles have permeated every nook and cranny of their lives, and that they need more support than what's currently available out there. And I'm hearing that from teens at BeMe too. They recognize that they're struggling, but they aren't always sure what it means, and they can't always find the right support, which is what inspired us at BeMe to build content on mental health that helps young people understand what they might be going through. It inspired us to give teens a safe space to explore their identities, to cope with those big feelings in the moment, or to connect with someone right away when they need help. Because when those negative thoughts hit late at night, they can't always wait till the next therapy session, right? And that's if you even have a therapist. And I think that if we as a society are going to build solutions to the youth mental health crisis that we're in, whether we're clinicians, policymakers, entrepreneurs, educators, parents, the best place to start is really truly understanding the problem and hearing from the real people who are going through these experiences. And that's what this film helps us do. So let's dive in.
All right. So first of all, it's my pleasure to introduce Christopher and Eric Ewer, who happen to be brothers and are the co-directors of Hiding in Plain Sight. Chris and Eric, can you each say hello and tell us a little bit about the different roles you played on the film, despite both sharing the title of director?
Chris?
Sure. My name is Chris Ewers. I was co-director on the film and also served as the director of photography, the cinematographer.
And I'm Eric Ewers, and I'm 10 years older than my brother. And I am co-director with him, and I am also the principal editor, supervising editor on the film.
Great.
Next, we are incredibly fortunate to have two people who were interviewed for the film and who shared their real life experiences with mental health struggles. Michaelan Powell, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm very grateful to be here. My name is Michaelan Powell. I'm one of the people featured in the film. Currently a mental health advocate. I recently graduated with my master's in criminal justice, and since then I've been completely dedicated to improving the conditions for offender reentry in the U.S. So,
Awesome. Great. And we're also pleased to have Billy Henderson. Thank you for joining us, Billy. And can you tell us a bit about yourself too?
I'd love to. Hi, my name is Billy Henderson. I use she, they pronouns. I am a student activist and a junior going to Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. And I am hoping to go on after Willamette to law school, where I can train to become a defense attorney to also help teens and keep them out of the justice system.
Awesome. Awesome. So thanks, everyone. Before we start, we'd like to share a little taste of what's in this amazing documentary. We'll share a couple more clips as we continue through the interview today. And let's start with that first one. Eric, I don't know if you can hear me, but we're not getting sound.
I couldn't make sense of the emotions. Why am I acting this way?
When I'm mad on the inside, I'm mad on the outside.
When feelings really interfere with their everyday ability to live, that's a challenge.
I feel very unmotivated, disinterested.
I had so many emotions that I had to deal with.
You may have a hard time identifying that something is wrong.
It's not like cute to be popping pills every day and overdose this many times.
I just didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted to leave it alone. At that age, how are you ever going to admit, I can't see past tomorrow?
These are the chronic issues of early life.
Why are so many kids having these issues?
Everybody's got their own story.
These are the journeys of more than 20 young Americans from all over the country and all walks of life, who have struggled with thoughts and feelings that have troubled and at times overwhelmed them. They share what they have learned about themselves, their families, and the world they live in.
You're fighting this fight that you truly have no idea whether you're going to win or not. Stay strong in your resolve because you're worth it.
They speak for many of us. They speak to all of us.
All right, thank you so much for playing that trailer. Let's start by talking a little bit about the film and about its origins. Eric and Chris, where did the idea originate, and what preconceptions did you have going in about the subject of youth mental health, and how did they shift in the process of making this film?
Well, the project actually originated from Ken Burns himself. He recommended Chris and I and Ewers Brothers for this project. I haven't really spoken to Ken in depth about why, but I believe that he had seen me struggle, and to some degree Chris as well, working with him over many years. And I just think he thought we were the right fit. We're no stranger to the topic in our families. However, like most people, especially our age, we knew nothing about it growing up. And it was just an opportunity for us to try to make a difference, to try and inform people, and in the process, try to learn more about ourselves and how we deal with our own issues. And we did that by listening to people like Michaelan and Billy in our film over the course of 3 years making this project.
I think it's really important to note too that it's one of the most, if not the most important conversations that we can be having as as a nation, as individuals, as a community, as families. We're all, none of us think that we're immune to physical illness, and yet there's no equity when it comes to mental health struggles. We other the experience and have for centuries other the experience of mental health challenges, when in fact they're just as important to our daily existence, regardless of who we are and what we do and where we live, and what race or religion or gender identity we are. These are issues that affect us all, and it's astonishing to us that that this is yet to be on a level playing field. So it was incredibly important to us right from the get-go to make sure that we were able to find the right people and present as relatable and a lived experience as humanly possible.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue. How did you in fact find the amazing young people that you interviewed for this film?
It was a very daunting process at the beginning. We started with doing historical pieces because that's what, the Ken Burns name is really known for. And we realized that's not going to make that connection with youth in the way that we want to. We then started our interview process with experts. And by the time we got through the first 3, while their insight was incredibly valuable and important, this was a film that we wanted to make about youth mental illness, and it just wasn't getting to the heart of the matter. And so Chris and I had some pretty deep conversations and said, let's go for it. Let's see if we can find young, untrained, raw, real, everyday kids and young adults, and see if they would be willing to tell us their stories. And the process really was just relying on mental health experts, psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists, word of mouth, just exploring ways to find people and get recommendations from experts who thought that young individuals would be not only willing, but capable of talking about their issues openly. We didn't think it would happen. We thought it would be really, really difficult. And the outpouring of honesty and candor and just telling us the way it is was just overwhelming. And I do have to say the exception was Billy. We had this brilliant idea, and I put that in major quotes, of doing a flyer that we could have given out in schools across the country. And we got all into writing the questions. I think we got maybe 4 back, Chris?
It was more than that, but not by much. Yeah.
Okay. And that's how we found Billy. Billy actually cut a questionnaire, received one, and filled it out diligently and sent it back. And we, like all of the interviewees, we did a pre-interview, talked with them, got to know them. They got to know us. We told them what our goal was, that it was their story to tell, not ours to bend and flex into positions that it didn't belong in. And we just went from there. It was a long 3-year process of learning about each other and trusting.
Wow.
So clearly the flyer process was worth it for the one person that you did get.
1000% worth it.
Michaelan and Billy, I'd love to hear from each of you. What did you think when you were first approached to be part of the documentary, or when you first saw the flyer? I mean, was it a hard decision for you to share your story? Were you contemplating, should I be part of this? Should I not? I mean, what was going through your mind?
I never, I had no idea that the film was going to reach such a large audience, or that it was going to be as impactful as it has been. Obviously, this is a subject that everybody should be talking about, and we should be working very hard towards making changes. But I wasn't expecting any of this at all. Through my experiences in recovery prior to the film, I'd grown very comfortable with sharing my personal experience, and I was surrounded by people who recognize the therapeutic value of being vulnerable for others who may be struggling in the same way. So I knew that ultimately I could be helping people who needed it the most, and that made it a lot easier. But I think the most important part of becoming comfortable with sharing my story on camera was just the overwhelming sense of support and safety that I got from the film production crew. They made it very clear, just like Erica just said, that this is my story. I don't have to share anything that I don't want to share. I can share as much as I want, and to be open and honest about what I was experiencing, what I'd experienced thus far.
That's amazing. Billy, what about you?
I really just have to echo what Michaela said. Like, you really touched on everything that I wanted to.
Well, you saw a flyer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I saw a flyer. I actually gotten that flyer through a podcast and a student council that my mom runs called Talk to Be Well. I was one of the first students who was on that council, and everyone there got the flyer. And so I just filled it out, and I was assuming there's going to be just a very small, simple little documentary interview thing, because that's what I'd been used to. I had done interviews kind of like it in the past, where they're just very, little short tidbits of my story, and then like once it came around to actually filming, and I started to get more of an idea of just how big this film was actually going to be. I was amazed. Like it was kind of daunting. But like Michaela said, like Chris and Eric and Julie, like they're just so caring, and it really felt like that they didn't want to pressure me into saying anything that I didn't want to say. So I just felt very safe in that sense of being able to tell my whole story, or at least how much of the story that I had at the time. Yeah, it wasn't a hard decision at all. Like I had heard from my mom about like a lot of people who would reach out to her after seeing other interviews that I had done, and they would reach out to her asking her for help about a lot of these things. And one of my big interviews was one where I was talking about my eating disorder, my experience with anorexia. And she got so many calls and emails from people asking about how can I get help with this. So I figured that if this film was going to be on a bigger scale, then I'd be able to help even more people. That's all I really care about. Like if I would have been able to even just reach one person from this film, I would have done it the same way.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So
well, kudos to you both. I think it takes a lot of courage to be willing to be vulnerable and to share your stories, whether it's for one person or whether it's for however many you all have reached with this film. But just huge kudos to you both.
Absolutely. Michaela, in a moment, I want to ask you a little bit about your story. But first, I'd like to start with a clip from the film. We have our director here, Eric, who's going to cue it
This
up.
time you'll have audio.
Great.
I grew up in an area that was wealthy, but I was from like the other side of the tracks. So I didn't have, growing up, we didn't have money at all. So I was constantly trying to fit in. My father has been incarcerated off and on my entire life. He's an addict, but growing up, when he was clean, he was an amazing father. But when he wasn't, it was ugly. Looking back now, his effect on my life was very traumatic. So my resilience definitely surprises me. Standing tall, that's amazing to me.
Wow. So Michaela, how would you describe your personal mental health journey and story today? And what do you think has been really the key or the most important part of your healing process?
I think that I would describe it as a roller coaster. In my experience, recovering mental health is rarely linear. It's a journey that can involve trauma. It may require medication or other outside therapeutic resources. And, you can experience triggering events that may cause, certain negative experiences to resurface, or you could just have a chemical imbalance that causes adverse symptoms to present themselves for seemingly like no reason at all. Um, so it's definitely not a linear process, especially for me. But I think that clip pretty much summed it up with the word resilience. Um, Everything that I've experienced personally has resulted in growth for me. I learned early on that if I can just survive at the very least, I'm giving myself the opportunity to learn from, a fairly negative experience. And that makes it easier for me to deal with anything that I may face in the future. Um, journey is the perfect word for it. I still have good days and I still have bad days. Personally am an individual who requires medication and therapy, in order to deal with my bipolar disorder. I'm also a recovering addict, so I still attend 12-step meetings, and I still rely heavily on my support system. I have all of these tools in my kit that I use to live a productive life, to live a life that is worth living. But that's not the case all the time. Like I said, I still have bad days. Some days, sometimes therapy just isn't working, or, something may trigger me on the outside that leads to a manic episode or a major depressive episode. I've got 10 years clean, but sometimes I still have cravings whenever something bad happens in life. Life isn't perfect. There's no cure for what I'm experiencing, but the more that I talk about it and the more that I check in with myself and I come to terms with what I'm feeling or what I'm experiencing and checking in, the easier it is.
I'm wondering if, you're sharing those experiences and being all of you, so incredibly honest about your experiences in the film. What kind of responses did you personally get? Like when you walk down the street and somebody sees, oh, I saw you in that documentary. And I'm just wondering what kinds of, encounters and conversations you've had.
So I mentioned earlier that I was used at the point when we started filming, was already used to sharing my story. That was within 12-step meetings, so I'm elaborating on my experiences in a room full of people that have had the same or similar experiences. This film exposed me to people who don't have the same understanding. And it was, and still continues to be at times, extremely uncomfortable. I'm a huge supporter of being vulnerable and being open in order to promote my personal healing and personal growth. But I discussed some things in that film that not many people knew. And, I've been met with an overwhelming sense of support from everybody in my community. My mom, who is my A1 biggest supporter, is constantly reposting clips and telling all of her friends with children, you should watch this, it can help. Just the other day I was walking into work and somebody who I never in a million years would have guessed had any interest in mental health stopped me and told me how proud they were of me and how much of a difference that I was making. And, it's all well and good. And I do feel good about my participation in the film. But I quickly realized that I shared those same sentiments for the other people that were featured in the film. The things that were shared by everybody else in that film were, raw and open and honest, and seeing them stand tall and be able to hold their head up and not be ashamed of what they had experienced has really helped me. So.
Kaylin, I love that you also speak so much, and you spoke to this in the film, about this idea of resilience. And I think it's important to note that resilience doesn't come out of thin air, right? It's not something that happens to you. It's something you invest in. It's something you learn. It's something you practice. I'm wondering what that looked like for you. Was there a shift? Was there a moment or a series of moments where you said, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to put those supports in place. I'm going to invest in this idea because I want to come out feeling resilient. And I know that this is something that I can obtain. And talk to me about that.
So it's so funny that you asked that question. Resilience is just a word that has always been in the back of my mind since day one of my journey. It's always kind of like a double-edged sword whenever people talk about the courage that we have for sharing our stories and how brave and how strong we are. Because, it's just my life. It's just my experience. I've dealt with trauma since, as early as I can remember. And you're absolutely right there. That doesn't just come out of thin air. I am fortunate enough to have people in my corner, namely my mother, who constantly stressed the fact that you just can't give up. There's so much more. And whenever you're in that dark time or that dark space, it is hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It is hard to remind yourself that it's going to get better, that these feelings are temporary, that it's not always going to be this crappy. But when I have people, in my support system that are there backing me and telling me how much they value me and reminding me of those good times that I had in life and how I can get back there with just a little work. That's what kicks it into gear for me. And also reminding myself, when I'm not in a bad spot, reminding myself kind of what that feels like and how, those pits of despair are almost unbearable. Telling myself that I don't want anybody else to feel like that. And if, me opening my mouth and talking about what I've been through, or me getting out of bed and brushing my teeth and getting taking a shower and doing the bare minimum, if that's going to help somebody else avoid those negative feelings, then that's what I'm going to do.
Amen.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And Billy, same question for you, but first let's take a look at another clip.
I live surrounded by a bunch of farmland, and the people weren't very accepting. So I never really got a chance to explore my identity until I moved here. I started to wear more feminine clothes, started to wear makeup every day. It was good at first, but the day I went to school with pink hair, my car ended up getting vandalized and someone wrote queer on the back windshield.
Billy, tell us more about your personal mental health journey. What's been the most important part of your healing?
For me, the most important part of my healing was the people around me. Luckily I've learned to become so vulnerable with everything I share because of my mom. She was there with me through every single rock bottom I'd ever been. She's seen me at my worst and she's seen me at my best. And it was easy to learn how to be vulnerable through her because she was just, she's able to tell, basically. She was able to tell how I was feeling and was able to tell that something was wrong, but she'd never push me to really talk about it or open up or pressure me about it. She just waited patiently for me to get to that point on my own terms. And so that has been one of the biggest things that has helped me grow in my journey, is just learning to be vulnerable and actually talking about my experiences instead of just keeping it all bottled up in my head until it explodes.
One thing that seems to have changed with, with Gen Z compared to previous generations is that there seems to be a lot more openness to talking about mental health issues and a lot less stigma attached to them. I know, talking to my own kids and nieces and nephews, they are so much more open in talking about mental health issues than my generation was. And I wonder how you all see that, and you, Billy and Michaelan, and how how does stigma still exist, and what kind of role does it play for you in your lives now and among your peers?
I know for me personally, I do have 10 years clean. So being seemingly so far removed from active addiction, I do experience, I hear a lot of the comments that, well, you don't look like somebody who, was on drugs, or you don't look like somebody with bipolar disorder, or things like that. It is a little disheartening to hear. I also have a few family members who adamantly believe that if we don't talk about it, it's not a problem. We don't need to discuss certain things. It's not that big of an issue. Or if there's an issue, we need to keep it contained within the family. And that is nothing but toxic ideal. It's not going away just because we don't talk about it. Just because we don't talk about struggles with mental health doesn't mean that it's not there. And a lot of times in my personal experience, I've learned that it makes things worse. Whenever I'm not open about what I'm experiencing, or I'm trying to hide a manic episode or a major depressive episode, or I'm hiding cravings, they just intensify, and that helps absolutely nobody, especially me. So I think that the idea or the practice of trying to reduce stigma and speaking about things so openly in order to reduce stigma is the most important thing that we can do. It's very important for me to be open for my own personal sanity, to make sure that I'm keeping things in check with everybody around me. I can't do this alone. It's absolutely impossible.
Absolutely. Can you imagine breaking a leg and then feeling like you need to hide it from everybody? No, we sign each other's casts, right?
Exactly.
It's just so different, and it doesn't need to be. Eric, you said this before. Why did it take so long, or why are we still not seeing both physical health and mental health on par with one another? But it's getting there. Billy, what do you think? How do you see stigma pop up?
I definitely do see it, see mental health issues being less stigmatized, and at least like more talked about. There is still a lot of work that has to be done. And I feel like a lot of that work mainly lies with older generations. I'm not gonna say nothing else about that, no call outs or nothing. But I still do see, like even in my generation, a lot of things are still not really talked about or seen as sort of like a taboo subject. Especially anorexia. That's something that while I've seen it be more openly discussed recently, a lot of that discussion is still mainly just focused around the recovery aspect, and no one really talks about the actual down and dirty of being in the middle of that absolutely oppressive mental illness. And it's again like Michaelan said, the same with addiction. I do see a lot of it being talked more openly about, but again, it's all focused around the recovery aspects rather than what it's actually like in the middle of when you're going through that. So I could definitely see more work to be done, but I'm really happy to see that at least my generation has been so forthright with discussing it. I hope that it'll lead to a lot less therapy later down the line and more
Me
therapy
too.
now.
Yeah, you know, both of you have identified yourselves as mental health advocates and activists. And I'm wondering, to what degree does your advocacy and your activism play a role in your healing?
I think personally, being able to share my story, like I've said countless times before, is cathartic. You know, it's beyond healing. And I've learned that through sharing my story and being open about talking about my struggles, it's helping to debunk some of that misinformation that is out there about mental health or about mental illness, namely. You know, like I said before, you know, people look at me and they don't see somebody who could have been, you know, a using addict, or somebody who can't get out of bed, you know, or refuses to get up and go to work. And getting the opportunity, thanks to this film, I've had the opportunity to talk to some fairly powerful people who have the platform to make these changes. You know, there's, you know, policymakers, healthcare professionals, educators, you know, as well as people who have their own mental health journey. And it's made me realize a few things, you know, or not me, but it's helped me help them realize a few things. You know, that first and foremost, mental illness is real. You know, it's not going anywhere. It can be ugly at times, but because it's not going away, we have to talk about its prevalence and seek realistic and affordable solutions for people who are suffering. You know, and it also shows that mental illness doesn't discriminate. You know, anybody can experience a mental illness at virtually any stage in their life. You know, so it's important for other people to realize that a diagnosis doesn't have to be crippling. You know, it doesn't have to be somebody's defining characteristic, although it can be a crippling aspect of somebody's life. It doesn't always have to look like that. You know, you could pass somebody on the street and have no idea that they're struggling with something. It's not just that, you know, that person, that image of a homeless person in the street behaving erratically and, you know, screaming and talking about, you know, prophecies from God. You know, it's not just somebody sitting in a dark room, you know, refusing to get out of bed, you know, tucked under the blankets, you know, crying. It can look like anything. It can look like anybody. You know, it doesn't discriminate based on age, gender, you know, sexual orientation, religion, race. None of that matters when it comes to whether or not somebody is experiencing a mental illness. So we have to take that into account when we're thinking about who needs help and how we get them that help. You know, and I've said this a number of times. I am very open about my diagnoses, but it's not who I am. You know, I'm not just an addict. I'm not somebody with bipolar disorder. I'm Michaelan, and sometimes I struggle. You know, but through talking about all this, you know, there's that saying, pain shared is pain lessened. And that has proven to be absolutely true for me throughout this experience. You know, and my biggest hope is that somebody else can find some relief by listening to our stories. So,
yeah.
Awesome.
I'm curious, what have you personally gotten out of being a part of this experience, about, you know, from being part of the documentary? How, if at all, has it influenced your own trajectory?
I have been afforded amazing opportunities. I think the biggest one being our invite to the White House. We all got to go to the White House and not just like stand outside. We were invited inside.
Wow.
And we were fed amazing hors d'oeuvres and, you know, fancy cookies that we didn't know even existed. And then we were able to meet the First Lady and talk about the film. And, you know, we were able to sit and watch an hour-long screening with some very prominent people in DC. to kind of show them that, they aren't just sitting in their living rooms and watching us on screen. They're watching us and then sitting next to us. And, we are kind of making it real for them. I've
Yeah.
also been able to travel and participate on a number of panel discussions and, be a keynote speaker for a bunch of mental health professionals and gotten job offers, so I have, it's actually changed my entire professional trajectory. It made me realize that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to continue to do this and use my public speaking gifts, for good and, continue to scream about how important it is that we make necessary changes in policy. So I'm beyond thankful. Like I said before, at times it is uncomfortable to talk about certain things, but, when I remember that, 1 in 4 people suffers from, has experience of mental illness, that I'm not alone in this, the things that I'm talking about, chances are pretty high that this is I'm not telling somebody something new, they know that this is real and this exists and it's an issue. So,
yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So before we do have questions coming in from the audience, and we'll go to those in just a minute. For Chris and Eric, I'm curious about a couple things. Every documentary involves a lot of painful editing, and I'm wondering what were the hardest things that you left, what were the hardest things for you as directors to leave on the cutting room floor? And I'm also wondering about the impact working on this film had on you as parents.
Wow, two very big questions. As far as the editing is concerned, I think the hardest part, I think Chris will agree with me, is just there was so much more to the stories of each person that we wanted to tell. And we had to balance the desire to be more detailed in storytelling about Michaelan and Billy and 21 other individuals. We had to balance that between the amount of detail and the number of people. And we went with more people because it was what we like to say, a tapestry of lived experience across all cultures and different races, different genders, different economic backgrounds, and from all over the country. So it was really hard to take out some very big moment in someone's story because we had to get the balance right. The goal was that our audience would never get confused or lost. That when Michaelan would start telling her story in the childhood chapter, when we get later on into the film, her story in childhood would resonate as to the symptoms she was starting to deal with, and same with Billy. And so we had to spend a good two and a half years trying to get that balance just right. And I think the way it's been received, I think we just heard that we've had over 4 million views on streaming.
Wow.
And it's still going, it's still climbing. That we've got the recipe right. And that we're honoring, the most important part is that we're honoring their stories. We give these young people a voice, where most films that we've seen just didn't do it. And they didn't let them tell the bad. And I put it that way because of a famous moment Patrick Kennedy had with us, leading mental health advocate. He told Chris and I, you got to tell the bad first. He says, I know this from my legacy in my life and my downfall as a congressman, to addiction and bipolar illness. And he said, if I've learned one thing, you have to tell the bad first, because no one really is going to listen to the good if you start with the good. So we had to put our brave faces on and honor these young people's stories. And so that, I think, is the easiest answer to that question. And I'll defer to Chris about his family, and then I can resonate about mine as well.
I think that that the process of making the film was, on so many levels, educational, unbelievably and deeply personal. But I think mostly it was an evolution. It was a process that happened. I mean, I'll just speak for me. It was a process that happened for me and my family that is indicative of what the film represents. I mean, if it can happen for me, it should and can happen for the rest of the viewing public, for anybody. I mean, the idea was that we were going to put together, as Eric had said, a tapestry of experience so vast that it would be almost impossible for somebody watching the film to not be able to relate in some part, small or large, to the stories of these 23 incredible human beings. What I realized is that I recognized parts of myself and my family's stories in everybody, every single one of them, regardless of the situations, their lived experience. It's a universal experience. Direct cause and effect from my family and I and this film. I mean, my wife and I have two young children, one of which experienced their own mental health challenges from an incredibly early age, 4. They were 7 when we first started the project, and we were in dire straits. I mean, we were experiencing suicide ideation and extreme aggression, and going back a couple of questions ago to this idea of generational empathy or understanding. My wife and I realized really early on that we were completely ill-equipped, uneducated, and essentially unable to provide our child with the basics in terms of care and support for their mental health challenges. Whereas, as you said, Neha, if they had broken their leg, we all signed their cast. So throughout the process of making the film, very quickly, both my wife and I recognized our shortcomings. We came about them honestly, our culturally assumed shortcomings, and very quickly began to educate ourselves on how to best meet our child where they were, and how to get them the best care that we could, how to support them through their struggles. And in the course of the 3 years that we made the film, our child has come full circle. I mean, it's amazing how common sense all of this is when we stop and really think about it, but yet we don't stop and think about it. And I think going to that generational sort of division. Yes, the younger generations are seem to be better equipped, more willing to share, but it's up to us, the older generations, those of us with children and certainly grandchildren. We have to recognize in ourselves first that on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever basis, that we're passing on these misconceptions, whether we're doing it consciously or subconsciously. We're projecting onto the younger generations, if we're not careful, the same misconceptions, the same thought process, the same inability to be empathetic and to relate. So it really starts with us. I mean, sure, we need to see change in policy and advocacy and treatment, and certainly research and funding, and all these other things that create the inequity between physical and mental health. But it really has to start with each and every one of us. We have to recognize that we're all in the same boat, and that, as somebody had said, it can happen to any one of us at any time, at any age. And I think that's where we truly really need to begin.
Great.
And I'll just add real quickly that for me, that word relatability that Chris has referred to a few times, quite simply, I saw myself in the stories of other people. And it finally allowed me to deal with something that I hadn't dealt with in over 50 years of trying to understand what was wrong inside of me. And it finally came to a head on this film, and it sounds like an ugly thing to say. It's a beautiful thing to say, because finally, through listening to Michaelan and Billy, and especially Michaelan, she and I had a talk, unfortunately, on stage. She's like, you almost made me cry. I said, you know, during COVID, when we were all stranded in our homes, I was editing this film in this office, and I was having conversations with Michaelan. That being, I'm listening to her story, all of her story, about how she dealt with her father, experiences with her father, and it hit very, very close to home for completely different reasons, but in the same exact principle. That's the power of storytelling. And if it can change me after 50 years of being stuck, and my path is, Chris will attest, my path is
Just 50?
Huh?
I said just 50.
Well, when was that moment in the past?
At that point, that's a good point.
When was that moment? But it really just came down to the power of listening to other people's stories is really what I think is one of the keys to understanding mental illness and in understanding one's own search for mental wellness. It's so critical. And you know, the last thing I'll say about that is, in the film, we say, but the first and often most difficult step is to simply start talking about it. These people simply started talking about it, and look what they've done.
Absolutely. They say there's no revolution without art, right? And I think a film like this, it makes space in the world for issues that have not been given this space before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, also the combination of excellent storytelling and really important facts and research and science, and marrying information and inspiring storytelling and personal stories is really powerful. So Tiffany, I think we have some questions from our audience now that we'd like to run to. What have you got?
Yeah, definitely. So we have some great questions, and you know, the conversation was so great, so we're just going to try to get to as many as possible. So let me go ahead and pull them up. So the first question that we have, which may be great for you to start answering, Dr. Chaudhry, and anybody else that wants to chime in, is from Cheryl. She's a founder of a nonprofit for young girls, and one of our programs is about mental health and wellness, with a focus on wellness. How young of a girl or a child can you discuss mental health with and have them be able to comprehend it? And she says that her age group that they work with is ages 9 through 25.
I say the younger, the better, just to keep it super short. I mean, I've seen kiddos as young as 3 learning how to identify feelings. You know, sometimes you show them a feeling chart. Do you feel sad? Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling mad? The sooner you can learn these skills and tools, the better it'll serve you later on.
Can I add to that real quick? I think that it is unbelievably important not to diminish or dismiss the value and the truth and the reality of the thoughts and feelings of young ones, just because they don't have the vocabulary yet or the experience to verbalize how they feel, or they haven't been around long enough to be, I mean, that's nonsense. I think that, we, again, passing it down, we're so accustomed to saying, oh, well, you don't really mean that. You don't know what you're talking about. Those words actually came out of my mouth once, in response to my child saying that they want to kill themselves at 5. You don't know what you're talking. It is unbelievable. We need to be present and to be human and to be accepting and understanding. We cannot. So, I mean, again, the earlier, I agree with you, Dr. Chaudhry, 100%, the earlier, the better. I mean, we don't it's not like we're not giving our kids like physicals, or we're not bringing them to the doctor, to our
Right.
pediatrician when they're a year and a half for, for checkups annually or whatever. We need to do it's the exact same thing. We need to do the exact same thing with our children.
Well
And at the
said,
very
Chris.
least, listen to your kids. Listen, really listen.
Tiffany, you have some more?
Yeah, thank you for those answers. This one is directed towards Michaelin and Billy. I will just also preface this by sharing that it was really admirable how courageous both of you were in talking about your experiences and with difficult topics like substance abuse and receiving a diagnosis and the stigma that comes with it. So this particular viewer is stating that they're having a struggle setting boundaries with their families, and are asking you kind of what you wish, how you communicated with your families, or wish that your families may have done have done differently in regards to your experience with both of those things.
Fantastic question. And it kind of builds on what we just talked about. I mentioned a few times how big of a supporter my mom is. And if you watch the film, I talk about how it wasn't always that way. I started experiencing symptoms early on, pretty young. And unfortunately, I was dismissed by a number of people in my life, not just family, teachers at school and counselors and people within the court system. I was labeled as, that moody, defiant teenager. I was just wanting to cause trouble. I just wanted to revel in the drama. And that wasn't the case at all. I was experiencing some very real mental illness symptoms. And I didn't know, just like Chris mentioned, I didn't have the language. I didn't have the knowledge to express like, hey, there's something going on inside that is resulting in me behaving this way. I wasn't able to say that. I was looked down at as a problem child. And through my mom educating herself and reaching out to resources that we had locally, she quickly realized, okay, something else is going on here. There's some underlying issue that we have to address. We didn't have easy conversations at first. While I was experiencing mental illness, I was a bratty teenager at times, so having these open discussions with my mom wasn't easy at all. They oftentimes ended in, screaming matches. So setting boundaries, I think that the most important thing to do in order to set boundaries with that child-parent relationship is to start from a place of listening and understanding, making sure that everybody who's involved understands right off the bat that this is a safe place to talk about this. There's no judgment here. I want you to understand that I know that there's something deeper here and we're going to figure this out together. Making sure that you emphasize that person isn't alone in figuring this out and going through this and validating feelings, because it is soul crushing to have your thoughts and feelings invalidated. It has definitely, having my feelings diminished at a young age definitely led to being closed off in some areas of my life as an adult. And I'm still working through a lot of that. And that's to no fault of my mother whatsoever. It was a learning experience for both of us, but starting from a place of open-mindedness and understanding, I think is crucial.
Well said. Tiffany, maybe we have time for one more.
Yeah,
maybe more
Billy, would you like to respond to that question as well?
Michaelin touched on a lot of what I wanted to say, and I definitely agree with what you mentioned about being a bratty teenager. So it took a bit for me to actually really open up to my family and my mom about what I was going through. And I guess just what I'd say is, at least in my case, we needed trust on both ends. And I had broken my parents' trust many, many times. And so it was very difficult to actually set those boundaries early on, because you have to earn that trust back. And luckily I've managed to do that now. But yeah, I really like what you said, Michaela, of just the open, honest conversations, and setting that parameter that it is a judgment-free zone. They don't get to make no snarky comments, nothing about what you may be going through. Just sit and listen.
And so this is just a last question for our speakers here, not only Michaelan and Billy, but also, you know, the Ewers brothers. You guys have been also courageous in sharing your own kind of reconciliation with self and addressing things that might have been buried for a long time through the process. So, you know, what can you share in terms of self-care and acknowledgement and acceptance that are helping you on like a regular basis, and how you're continuing to learn from that?
Let me start, because it's going to be short. I'm still figuring that one out. Yeah, I got a long ways to go there. You know, I think that it's a never-ending process, you know, and the more that we learn about it and the more that we learn about ourselves, the better off we are. But I mean, you know, whether you're doing it for yourself or you're doing it for your loved ones, I mean, it doesn't matter. You got to figure it out.
So I'll jump off of Chris. I think for me, therapy has been invaluable. It can be hard to find, and then you have to find the right person that feels good. But at the very least, that process of talking through my own issues with someone who is has no skin in the game. It's someone who's just there to listen and help you answer your own questions, I think is invaluable. And if you don't have a therapist, someone you trust, I think that's huge. Don't be afraid to take medication if someone in a professional capacity tells you it may help. Don't listen to the stigma, you know, oh, did you take your meds today? They help. I've been on meds for 23 years now. And I'm proud to say it because it changed my life for the better. And I think the third thing would be to be vulnerable. I spent most of my life shutting everyone around me down because it was easier than being vulnerable and listening and looking at something, a conflict or whatever it was for what it is. I wouldn't do that. And now I find myself, I'm still far from perfect, but I try my best to be vulnerable and to allow myself to tell the other person that I'm not feeling good inside and that I'm not working through this the way I should be working through it. And it's that self-awareness. Once you're aware that something's not quite right, then you got to be aware of it forever. And that's not a bad thing. We all have these things, and you just have to be aware of it, because as soon as you block it out, it's just going to grow and get worse. I think
I can see why Ken chose you to be the directors in this film. It was a really, really good choice. I think we're kind of running out of time here. So I really want to thank you all for joining us today, and for the PBS, WETA, and Wellbeings teams for helping make this event possible.
And as mentioned, if you'd like to watch Hiding in Plain Sight, it is now available for streaming on Amazon Prime, and it'll be free on demand for the PBS app, again, in honor of Suicide Prevention Month.
And now just a brief word from our sponsor. MindSite News is committed to reporting on youth mental health. So if you'd like to stay connected to our coverage, you can subscribe to our newsletter with the link provided in the chat. That way you won't miss a beat as we investigate the failings of the mental health system, shine a light on innovative solutions, and present additional MindSite News live events like this one. To give you a sneak preview, next month we'll be doing a series of events focused on new research and developments in the world of psychedelic therapy, including a live interview with Michael Pollan. So stay tuned for that. And Tiffany.
And also your contributions help to keep our work alive. So please consider becoming a MindSite News donor with the donation link provided in the chat. Thank you again to everybody who participated in the event, also spent this evening with us, and I hope that you have a beautiful night and take good care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye.